Hi, everybody. It's Friday, January 28th, finally starting to warm up. Hopefully some hot discussion tonight. Kelley Williams-Bolar, her story has gone international. We'll talk about the latest twists in the case. Maureen O'Connor, the former Summit County prosecutor, weighs in now as Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. And we'll look back 25 years ago today at the loss of Judy Resnik, an astronaut aboard the Challenger. Those stories and more next on NewsNite. So much to talk about this week. Glad to have you along. Also glad to have along Ed Esposito here this week from WAKR. And always great to welcome Steve Hoffman from the Akron Beacon-Journal. I always love to quote movies and Shakespeare, and there's a quote in the 80s movie St. Elmo's Fire that says, there's the brink of insanity and then there is the abyss. Last week it seemed like the brink of insanity with the Kelley Williams-Bolar case.
Now it's the abyss.
Now we've hit the abyss with the international media and the network talk shows coming to Akron on a woman whose first conviction was because she lied about her income to get free lunches for her kids no matter what school they went to. Where do we start with where this case is now?
I want to start with something, and I mean, with all due respect to my friends both on and off the set from the Beacon-Journal, and I say this because we did a crappy job in the media of covering this case to begin with. Because there was only one pair of eyes, there was only one set of ears in the courtroom from the media, effectively, covering the case, and it was Ed Meyer from the Beacon-Journal. And again, with all due respect, not always an easy job to do this stuff. I think there were things that are in the record, that were in the case that were presented, that weren't made public. It may have been because you only had so much space. It may have been because you only had so much time to write the story regardless. But with that, just that one filter coming out, you don't get a complete set of what the jury actually saw when they considered the things that they considered when they found her guilty, when they hooked up on the theft charges by 11-to-1 find you guilty votes, which means there's only one vote in that jury room that didn't want to find her guilty, that didn't find her guilty at that point on the theft charges. So when you have, when everything is being focused through this one prism of Ed Meyer, and then when you have an editorial like you had Sunday, which basically helped position and define this case as being either black mom goes to jail for sending kids to white school, or it's something about mom just doing the simple thing, trying to get school lunches, because you're trying to make the story easier to read. In essence, what happens is the facts didn't get in the way of a good story, and these ignorant commentators in New York, when you say the talk shows come to Akron, the talk shows haven't come to Akron. Whoopi Goldberg didn't come to Akron. Whoopi Goldberg didn't look at the case. Whoopi Goldberg hasn't talked to people, but then she's on television talking about this. She didn't look at this stuff. If you were to ask them how many times did Kelley Williams-Bolar lie, they can't tell you. If you were to ask what documents that she lied on and how many times, they can't tell you. If you ask them how many years has this been going on, how many families resolved their issues with the Copley-Fairlawn School District, but she was the only one who didn't? How many of those families were African Americans? So, I mean, but you've got this race and this news ignorance all together in this tempestuous pot. It starts with incomplete reporting. It starts with a fuzzy-headed editorial. It starts with us and the rest of the media not doing our jobs and having someone in the courtroom to cover this for a variety of reasons. And what it leads to is opinions that aren't based in fact and are meritless, but now it's at the point where everyone likes something else, another piece of their piece of their anatomy. Everyone has an opinion.
I want Steve to weigh in, but a couple of points. One, the trial only lasted 2 days, and my colleague Bob Jones from Channel 5 was there both days, along with Ed Meyer. Two, Robin Roberts from Good Morning America did come to Akron and sit down with Kelley Williams-Bolar, so at least one of the network folks did come to town.
Did she go through the case file, Eric?
I'm just establishing that
did she
there are some that came to Akron.
Did she even send a producer that went through the case file?
Well, I got to say that
I don't know, but I'm just trying to lay the groundwork. And the day of her sentencing, which would be the third day of the trial, there was quite a bit of media there, myself included. Steve, the floor is yours.
I may say, I may be fuzzy-headed, but I'm not fuzzy-faced.
Oh, you like this mustache.
I think the point here is that I think very few people, at least in our newsroom and editorial offices, had any confusion about who Kelley Williams-Bolar was.
Bob Dyer certainly doesn't.
And what she had done. And I think the larger point here, and one of the prisms, to steal your word, that has not been fully illuminated, I guess, to beat this metaphor to death, is the prosecutor's office. And politically speaking, if I were advising our prosecutor, Sherry Bevan Walsh, I would tell her to do exactly what she's doing, which is not to say anything. I mean, that's a pretty cynical view. But from a news standpoint, people need to understand that the prosecutor's office in Ohio, the county prosecutor's office, has a huge amount of discretion in cases, in bringing cases forward. I know a grand jury was involved here. I know a jury convicted her and all that. But the fact of the matter is that Walsh's office pursued this, did not want to talk about a misdemeanor, and I think that is the point that this story began to flip. When the felony, when it became clear that this woman was going to be convicted of a felony, because that carries, as the judge noted, that carries with it a very, very heavy burden for someone. I mean, she might be able to get her record expunged, but the first question, and there is discretion here, is her teaching license. The second question, as others have pointed out this week, is a felony conviction, if it's not expunged, is a huge burden to employment. So that's point one, and I don't think there was anything necessarily fuzzy-headed about the editorial. We had our thought about the nature of the crime and the nature of the punishment. We were careful not to defend the actions. The other point I would make quickly is the larger context to this story is a county typical in Ohio with 17 different school districts. Some have open enrollment, some don't. It's a very confusing system. It's an extremely fragmented system, and it is prone, these suburban districts like Copley-Fairlawn, which in full disclosure I live and I pay taxes, Copley-Fairlawn is almost totally self-supported. So you get these situations where some suburban school districts, not all, are very, very sensitive to people open enrolling or trying to come into their school district because it's money. It's a money question. So it's a really confusing, ridiculous system to begin with. Anyway.
We have a few minutes left before we go to the internet, and I want to talk about a couple of the casualties to all this, and that would be the two school districts, Copley and also to the Akron schools. It seems the Copley schools have been labeled racist when so much of this had to do with financial figures. The Akron schools have been labeled unsafe, even though 41 students from Copley open enroll and choose Akron instead. It seems like there's a lot of players here, guys. There's a lot of victims here, and it still falls back, and it all begins with Kelley Williams-Bolar, who, as I understand, had she just agreed to pay $10 a week back for life, would have settled all this with the Copley schools.
You know, there were so many of the families, and this is a great point. When you look back at, why Kelley Williams-Bolar, why a felony, not a misdemeanor, she painted herself into this corner.
She did.
Again and again and again. And it just, and I think you're going to hear, my sense is you'll probably hear a lot more from Prosecutor Walsh after decisions made on next steps on whether or not they retry her on the hung counts. Well, so there is a legal process to go through on this, but the point is, Kelley Williams-Bolar started this. She perpetuated it. She extended it out. She wouldn't take responsibility. Dozens of other families took responsibility, pulled their kids out of Copley-Fairlawn right away. There were also dozens of other families who went and either appealed residency, established residency, paid tuition, did the right thing.
Right. The problem with the justice system is this. Yes, you had a woman who appears to have pushed the envelope in a variety of ways for a long, long time. There are questions now about her housing, her AMHA housing. There are questions about her voting.
Her driver's license.
Right. There are all kinds of. So this woman, she filed civil rights lawsuits. The question is, how does the system function?
And I want to talk more about those questions as we shift the discussion now, and a lot more to talk about on NewsNite.net.
For more NewsNite content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at NewsNite.net
Former Summit County prosecutor Maureen O'Connor has done a lot since moving on to Columbus, first lieutenant governor, then the Supreme Court, now Chief Justice. Earlier this week, Ed sat down with her to talk about the challenges ahead.
What do you do to improve the system that we have? And there are ways to improve it. One of the ways that I would like to improve it is to eliminate partisan primaries. Ohio is the only state in the country that has a partisan primary and a nonpartisan general election. That sends mixed signals.
Right, because in March you have to run as a Republican, or
March or May, whenever the primary is.
Or former Chief Justice Eric Brown would have to run as a Democrat.
Right.
And then the two of you run as we're justices. We're justices. Don't look at us as Republican or Democrat.
Exactly.
So and it does send confusing message to the public, who may already be confused over exactly what judges do at which level.
Right, and so if you emphasize that partisan labels are important, you also send a very, I think, disturbing message to the voter that it matters and how I make my decisions on whether I'm a Republican, a Democrat, a Green Party, an independent, or whatever political party. And that's one of the things that you really need to leave outside, you know, the deliberation room, is your political persuasion, your political affiliation. So it would be more honest, more telling, and I think more correct to eliminate the partisan label in the primaries, and the two top vote getters would then face off in the November also on a nonpartisan level. And you could theoretically have two Democrats that face one another, two Republicans, a Democrat, a Republican, independents. It doesn't matter. It truly doesn't matter what the political party or political affiliation is, and it should not. And that is a way to I think to emphasize the fact that it's not something that the voters should take into consideration.
More on Maureen O'Connor in just a moment, but great to have along Phil Trexler from the Akron Beacon-Journal, who joins our panel now. And Ed, Maureen was always a good interview when she was a prosecutor. We don't hear from her very much on the court. It was good to hear her open up a little bit.
You know, I thought it was interesting. You know, it really wasn't an interview about her, the person, but I think some of her observations about the road she's taken to get to where she is was interesting. I think her observations on being a first woman Chief Supreme Court Justice in Ohio, she made the very interesting observation that I mean the Supreme Court now is a female Supreme Court. 4 out of 7 justices are women, so it's a majority women on the Supreme Court, and what it means to be you know, what it means to be changing that, basically the white boys club, which traditionally have been what courts have been, and how that face changes and what the diversity on it makes. We talked a little bit about election of judges. I think she shares the idea that Tom Moyer had, that merit selection of judges was better. I think one thing that concerns, but she recognizes that there's really no political will to change that. People in Ohio want to have direct voter accountability in election of their judges. But you know, it was interesting. I think one of the things that concerns her very much is that people don't know what judges do. People don't have an understanding of the system, and they don't understand necessarily what muni court is, or common pleas court, or a district court is, or you know, how the Supreme Court works. And you know, and I think that's a little bit frustrating, because you hear and see a lot of things about, you know, people's opinions of the judicial system. They don't understand. They think judges are all powerful, and while she does make the point that while judges do have power, judges are also required to follow the law and follow legal procedure. She is very proud. We talked a little bit about basically the Civility Project, which is, you know, not necessarily gentler, but a kinder and more respectful manner of dealing with each other in the courtroom, not only among judges. She talked specifically about how civility plays a role now in disciplinary hearings. That you know, judges that get out of line, there have been a few in our area, Portage County most recently, I think, but how, you know, the old days, you know, I can remember 20 years ago when judges were truly the kings of their courtroom, and they could just abuse anybody that came walking in the door. You don't really see that happening as much as you used to in the past. I think judges are, there's been more of a push, and O'Connor is certainly part of that, for judges and lawyers to put themselves in the other shoes and try and be respectful. Even when you're trying to put someone in jail, you don't have to get in their face and be
and we can
uncivil
see
to
the
them.
you can see the entire interview on NewsNite.net. And
I'm hoping it gets. I'm hoping it goes on television.
Yeah,
I'm hoping
get
it
more.
gets on the air because it was a very interesting interview. There was one question at the end that I asked her: if you won the lottery today and had millions and millions of dollars, would you invest it in Ohio? Because so many court decisions now have impact on business climate.
And she said no, of course, right?
No, she of course said yes. But what she said about that was I think was kind of interesting.
Good. Well, more of that on NewsNite.net, and hopefully more to come. And before she was the Chief Justice, she was a common pleas judge right here in, or I should say, in Summit County.
And prosecutor too.
And prosecutor, but transitioning to the court. Akron police officer filing a suit that's going to end up in the court, Phil, that you covered this week.
Yeah, that was a zinger that the officer Donald Chismenos fired back at the city. This all had to do with some of the series of stories I think that the Beacon Journal wrote last year, outlining Officer Donald Chismenos, a gang unit officer, veteran of the department for almost 17, 18 years, and he came under the microscope last year on the handling of at least one prominent case, and that was a woman in AMHA housing who was videotaping him making an arrest. That sparked a disciplinary hearing, got him suspended. The mayor took a look at his overall record and tripled it. In the course of this, though, the police auditor, Philip Young, made some comments to the Beacon Journal about Chismenos, saying, I don't know how long, this guy's called him a bad seed and said he should have been fired years ago. Well, so while Chismenos is fighting his 45-day suspension, they're still waiting on the arbitrator to decide. Chismenos has now filed a lawsuit saying that the mayor's handling of this case was racially motivated, that he was trying to curry favor from the black voters by coming down hard on this officer who had brought felony charges against the woman, the black female.
Serious allegations, tough to prove?
Well, it's there in black and white, the comments that Phil Young made about him, calling him a bad seed. Now, that's part of the defamation claim that's in the lawsuit. So he's claiming defamation of character and slander. And again, everybody involved here was black. The sergeant who supposedly told him to let the case go and not charge this woman with a felony and have her arrested, he is black. Phil Young is black. The woman who was arrested is black. And of course, Marco Somerville, who's also black, was also not named in the suit, but is obviously has had some feelings about this case as well. So Chismenos felt that he was done wrong, and also your TV station as well, while not named as a defendant, is also named in there too, because the city inadvertently, they say, released his address and it was broadcast over TV. And the officer says that as a result of this, relatives of gang members were trolling by his house, and his wife and he suffered some mental anguish, and she moved out of the house for a while with the kids. So it's
the address was part of a document. The document was shown on TV.
Exactly. But the racial components of this lawsuit are very interesting. He's basically saying that the city came down hard on him because he's a white police officer who they felt had a vendetta against this black female, and that's what the mayor used the word of personal vendetta. So this one will play out. We'll see if it's a summary judgment, but if it does go to trial, it certainly would be an interesting.
Any merit, do you think, in the court to give this?
Yeah, I think it depends what a judge or a jury comes out of this with. I don't think there's much merit in terms of the public discussion of his performance as an officer. If I recall correctly, when the mayor really targeted most of his disciplinary action on the fact that he ignored the orders of a direct supervisor for this. I think anytime you have someone using the system to stop debate, or which essentially is what he did when he wanted to stop the videotape, the fact of the matter. But the comments from Young, especially before the discipline was handed down, certainly, his argument is going to be certainly that there was that it's defamation of character, and that's not unusual right now. The law allows for that. So, but
it's one public official speaking about another public official.
Right. So, but and are they public figures? Can you say, I think this guy's a bad cop? I look at his record, I think he's overly aggressive. Is that defamation of character?
Yeah.
Like Phil says, the racial component is intriguing.
Yeah.
From a debate. And quite frankly, this is a debate that has been happening under the surface so much in Akron. Now this is probably the first time it's actually bubbled up in terms of an actual.
And we will follow this one in the courts and continue to talk about it as it unfolds here on NewsNite.
On NewsNite.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNite.net.
25 years ago today, the Challenger blew up shortly after a minute after takeoff. We were all here in Northeast Ohio when it happened. Everybody remembers, this is one of those key moments, you remember where you were.
Yeah, I was at Kent State University leaving a economics class.
Yeah,
you were in the newsroom?
Yeah, we were in the newsroom, and it was quite an emotional.
What was your job in the newsroom back then?
I was a reporter, political reporter. So this didn't, directly affect my beat as such, but I think all of us were riveted, by the image. It was really frightening. And I think in the aftermath, my wife's a teacher at the Resnik Elementary School, and I think one of the positive things or good things that came out of this tragedy was a sense of who she was and the dedicated student that she was, a woman who was had an interest in science, and I think that's kind of carried forward in a positive way for certainly for the elementary school, and also I think her legacy at Firestone High School and elsewhere in the community that shows that kind of she was a very focused person and had her goals, and that's a great example.
I think it also taught us too that these launches are not automatic. It got to a point where they were so commonplace back in the early to mid '80s that we kind of ignored them. We assumed that they would go up and they would come down and everybody would be okay. This launch wasn't even televised live nationally. If it was on CNN, and nobody had CNN back then. But we were all going about our daily lives while these folks were risking their lives for their country. And I was talking to Dave Scott, who's in our newsroom, and he said that we learned about it through the newswire. It wasn't when nobody was standing in the newsroom watching this launch. Then it slowly broke. CNN was in its infancy. It hadn't become the major cable network that it is today. And but I think it showed us that don't take things for granted when it comes to the space exploration. That this stuff is serious, and I think it's changed it forever now.
Yeah, at the risk of dating myself horribly, I was a camp counselor in Ohio when the first moon landing was made, and we set up televisions and tried to get the kids, the campers, interested in this, as a piece of history, and. To them, they'd grown up with this. Sure. The rockets go up, the people come back, everything's, I mean, there was very little drama in their minds because this was, and I think this is what happened. And this, we are in a time of, I think, reevaluation of the manned spaceflight. And we have Senator Glenn, our former Senator Glenn in Ohio, who still speaks out from time to time about the importance of continuing the exploration, manned exploration. On the other side of the coin, we have places like NASA Lewis, other technologies that are available to us that are amazing. The robotic explorers that we have now can do amazing things with far less risk. So it's sort of a question. This question, a lot of the questions raised by the Challenger and about manned spaceflight are still out there all these years later, and we're still sort of discussing, how do we do this? And as Phil's saying, this is a risky business, and it has been. Sure. You go back and read Tom Wolfe's book, The Right Stuff, about the early program, and it was scary. I mean, they mask a lot of this, but for the people in the capsules, John Glenn, the first American to orbit the Earth, it was really, really scary.
I can only imagine, but this Challenger disaster had such an impact on everybody here in Akron. I was in band class at North High School, and they told us it happened. Then I got to government class. They actually put the TV on with the rabbit ears, and we got to see it play out. And I remember President Reagan coming close to tears that night in a very short address, but the whole nation. It was that first time that put us everywhere where we all remember where we were, at least for the teenagers, young adults that we were at the time. One thing that stands out about Judy, I had a chance years later to interview Bert Williford, her favorite teacher from Firestone. He said that Judy prepared herself for a career when she was in high school that didn't exist. Women weren't in NASA when Judy was in high school, but she knew someday they would be, so she prepared herself with that vision. And that story gets told over and over to kids here in Akron, and I think it still rings true 25 years later.
Yeah, she certainly has left her impact, and she is probably, obviously ranks right up there as one of Akron's greatest citizens. In death, I think, we learned more, kids learn more. She has helped guide, the careers of young folks, and but for her death, we wouldn't have Resnik Elementary. We wouldn't have people who are dreaming higher and realizing the impact that she's made on so many lives.
Yeah, you look at the latest reports on science, particularly attainment in science from our national assessments, and pretty sobering. I mean, clearly more kids need to be encouraged, and our system needs to be improved in precisely these areas. The math and sciences, and I have a daughter who's an engineer, and it's good to see that encouragement, but there needs to be more. And
we have less than a minute left. Do you think this did for space coverage by the media what obviously the Kennedy assassination did for presidential coverage, that you need to cover every minute of this because you just don't know?
Yeah, and I think that's true, and obviously I think it helped fuel the expansion of cable news network, and now obviously the internet has done even taken it even a step further. But and also too, and I think it's important that we remember, and it's the 25th anniversary of this tragedy, and it's important for everybody to look back and to reflect and the changes and the advancements that we've all made as a society in the last 25 years.
Good point. We'll end on that. Phil, Steve, thank you so much. Also, thanks to Ed Esposito. You can watch more, of course, always on NewsNite.net. Next week, we'll talk with Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown. Have a great weekend. See you next Friday for NewsNite.